Get your hands off the wheel, now, or I swear I'll drop you right here. The scream tore through the humid night air, competing with the blinding strobe of red and blue lights. Rain hissed against the asphalt like static. Judge Sterling Pembroke didn't flinch, though the cold muzzle of a Glock 19 was inches from her temple. She looked past the trembling barrel into the dilated, rage-filled pupils of Officer Jasper Whitbourne. "You have made," Sterling whispered, her voice terrifyingly calm amidst the chaos. "A grave miscalculation, officer." The gavel struck the mahogany sound block with a finality that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards of the Hall of Justice. It was a sound that Sterling Pembroke had perfected over 15 years, a sharp, singular crack that demanded silence and commanded respect. "Bail is denied," Sterling said, her voice an instrument of absolute authority. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. The courtroom, usually a hive of whispered legal strategy and shuffling papers, froze. Camille Frost, a defense attorney known for her theatrics and her crimson lipstick, stood up, her bracelets jangling. "Your Honor, this is preposterous. My client has no prior convictions in this state. To deny bail on a simple possession charge—" "Ms. Frost," Sterling cut in, her eyes narrowing behind her rimless glasses. She leaned forward, the high-backed leather chair groaning softly. "Your client was found with 3 kilos of fentanyl in a school zone. He is not a hobbyist, he is a merchant of death. And looking at the flight itinerary found in his glove compartment, he has a burning desire to visit a country with no extradition treaty by Tuesday morning. He stays." Sterling closed the file folder, the slap of paper echoing in the silent room. "Court is adjourned." She swept out of the courtroom, her black robes billowing like the wings of a predatory bird. As she entered her chambers, the facade of the Iron Orchid, as the press had dubbed her, softened only slightly. She stripped off the robe, revealing a tailored cream silk blouse and high-waisted trousers that screamed quiet luxury. Sterling Pembroke was a woman who had clawed her way up from the jagged edges of the city's poorest district to the highest seat in the criminal court. She was a black woman in a system built by men who looked nothing like her, and she had survived by being smarter, faster, and infinitely more ruthless when necessary. She checked her reflection in the vintage mirror by the door. Not a hair was out of place. Control. It was all about control. "Judge Pembroke?" She turned to see her clerk, Dahlia King, hovering in the doorway. Dahlia was young, brilliant, and perpetually anxious. "What is it, Dahlia?" It's the Whitbourne case, ma'am. The internal affairs file you requested? It's on your desk." "But—" Dahlia hesitated, biting her lip. "Be careful with this one. Jasper Whitbourne comes from a dynasty of cops. His father was a captain. His grandfather was a commissioner. If you go after his badge for that brutality complaint, the precinct will push back. Hard." Sterling walked over to her desk and picked up the thick manila folder. She traced the name typed on the label. Officer Jasper Whitbourne. "Dynasties fall, Dahlia," Sterling said, slipping the folder into her leather briefcase. "Usually because the heirs are too arrogant to realize the ground is shifting beneath them. This officer broke a suspect's jaw while the man was handcuffed. I don't care who his grandfather was. If the review board won't act, I will ensure the Judicial Oversight Committee does." "Just drive safe, Judge," Dahlia said, a shadow crossing her face. "The storm is getting worse." Sterling smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "I always do." She took the private elevator down to the judge's secure parking garage. Her car, a pristine vintage charcoal gray Mercedes SL, sat under the fluorescent lights like a resting beast. It was her pride and joy, a symbol of everything she had earned. As she slid into the leather driver's seat and turned the key, the engine purred with a deep, throaty growl. Pulling out of the garage, the city was already being battered by a torrential downpour. The streetlights smeared across the wet windshield. Sterling turned on some soft jazz, letting the saxophone wash away the tension of the day. She was tired. She wanted a glass of red wine, a hot bath, and the silence of her empty, beautiful home in the hills. She didn't notice the patrol car idling in the alleyway 2 blocks from the courthouse. She didn't see the dark eyes of Jasper Whitbourne watching the expensive car roll by, his jaw set tight, his mind looking for a target to vent the frustrations of a day where nothing had gone his way. Officer Jasper Whitbourne gripped the steering wheel of his cruiser until his knuckles turned white. The rain hammered the roof, sounding like gravel thrown against tin. "Sarge is going to chew us out for missing quota again," Jasper muttered, staring through the wiper blades. In the passenger seat, Officer Kieran Aldridge shifted uncomfortably. Kieran was a rookie, barely 6 months out of the academy. He still believed in the motto written on the side of the car: to protect and serve. Jasper, 10 years his senior, believed in a different motto: to dominate and control. "We've got an hour left, Jasper," Kieran said softly. "Maybe we just call it? The roads are slick. Accidents happen in this weather." "Accidents happen when people don't follow the rules," Jasper snapped. He was in a foul mood. Earlier that day, he'd received a notification that an old excessive force complaint had been reopened by the Judicial Oversight Committee. Some judge was digging around. He didn't know who, and he didn't care. He just felt the walls closing in, and it made him aggressive. He needed a win. He needed a bust. Then, he saw it. The vintage Mercedes SL rolled through the intersection. It was moving perfectly within the speed limit, signaling correctly. But to Jasper, the car represented everything he hated tonight: wealth, arrogance, someone who thought they were better than him. And then he saw the silhouette of the driver. "Look at that," Jasper sneered, sitting up straighter. "Nice ride for that neighborhood. Probably a dealer moving product or a girlfriend of some high roller." "Jasper," she stopped at the yellow, Kieran noted, checking the computer. "Tags come back clean. Registered to a corporate LLC. It's a rental or a company car." "Broken taillight," Jasper lied. The taillights were perfectly functional. "I don't see—" "I said broken taillight, Aldridge." Jasper slammed his hand on the dashboard. "Light 'em up." Kieran hesitated, a knot forming in his stomach. He knew this tone. This was the tone Jasper used right before things went sideways. But Kieran was the rookie, and the blue wall of silence was a lesson learned early. He flipped the switch. The lights burst into life, painting the rainy street in strobes of red and blue. Ahead, the Mercedes slowed down immediately and pulled over to the curb with practiced ease. This annoyed Jasper. He wanted them to run. He wanted a chase. A chase justified the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Watch my 6, Jasper commanded, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Jasper, take it easy," Kieran whispered, grabbing his rain hat. "It's just a traffic stop." Jasper didn't answer. He slammed the door and marched into the rain, his hand resting heavily on the butt of his holstered weapon. He didn't put on his hat. He wanted the driver to see his face. He wanted them to see the anger. He approached the driver's side window, flashing his heavy flashlight beam directly into the side mirror to blind the occupant. He rapped his knuckles hard against the glass. "Roll it down," he barked. The window slid down smoothly, electric motor humming. The woman inside was calm. Too calm. She didn't look terrified, she looked annoyed. She was dressed in silk, her hands resting at the 10 and 2 position on the wheel. "Good evening, officer," Sterling said. Her voice was level, the same voice that had sentenced 3 men to life imprisonment earlier that week. "Is there a problem?" "License and registration," Jasper demanded, ignoring her question. He shined the light directly into her eyes. She blinked but didn't look away. "May I ask the reason for the stop first?" "I asked for your license and registration," Jasper shouted, leaning in closer. Rainwater dripped from the brim of his nose onto the expensive leather interior. Do you have a hearing problem, or do you just have a problem following orders? I have a problem with unlawful stops, Sterling replied, her tone dipping into the freezing register. My vehicle is in perfect condition. I was not speeding. I signaled my turn. Jasper's ego flared like a match dropped in gasoline. A civilian talking back. A black woman in a luxury car questioning his authority. In his mind, the narrative was already written. She was hiding something. Drugs, guns, stolen money. Step out of the car, Jasper ordered, stepping back and unlatching the retention strap on his holster. On what grounds? Suspicion of DUI, Jasper improvised. I smell alcohol. Sterling raised an eyebrow. I haven't had a drink in 10 years, officer. If you smell anything, it's likely your own desperation to find a crime where there isn't one. Inside the patrol car, Kieran watched with wide eyes. He couldn't hear the words, but he saw Jasper's body language. The stiff shoulders, the hand hovering near the gun. Jasper, don't! Kieran whispered to the empty air. Get out of the car! Now! Jasper screamed, grabbing the door handle and wrenching it open. Get out! Sterling turned her body, reaching toward her purse on the passenger seat to retrieve her identification. She's reaching! Jasper yelled, mostly for the benefit of the dashcam, though his adrenaline made him believe it. Gun! Hands! Let me see your hands! He drew his weapon. The Glock 19 was leveled at her head. The scene froze. The rain crashed down. Sterling Pembroke froze, her hand hovering inches from her leather bag. She looked at the gun, then up at Jasper. Officer, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than his shouting. If you pull that trigger, you better make sure you don't miss, because if I survive, I will take more than your badge. I will take your freedom. Get on the ground, Jasper roared, grabbing her arm and yanking her out of the vehicle. She stumbled, her expensive heels catching on the wet asphalt, but she didn't fall. Jasper spun her around, slamming her chest against the side of her beloved Mercedes. The cold metal pressed against her cheek. He kicked her legs apart. Kieran, get the cuffs! Jasper shouted back at the cruiser. Kieran ran up, breathless, rain-soaked. Jasper, what the hell? She wasn't... Cuff her! Resisting arrest! Assault on an officer! We're tossing the car! Sterling didn't struggle. As Kieran apologetically pulled her wrists behind her back, the cold steel of the handcuffs bit into her skin. It was a sensation she had watched hundreds of defendants describe, but feeling it was different. It was dehumanizing. It was infuriating. But as the cuffs clicked shut, a cold, calculating rage settled over Sterling Pembroke. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was at work, and she was preparing the case of her life. You are making a mistake, Sterling said, her face pressed against the wet roof of her car. My identification is in the bag you just threw onto the street. Jasper was tossing the contents of her purse onto the wet asphalt. Lipstick, a phone charger, a notebook, and the file folder labeled Jasper Whitbourne spilled out into the puddles. Jasper was too frantic to read the label on the folder yet. He was looking for drugs. He needed to find something to justify the stop, justify the gun, justify the violence. Shut up, Jasper yelled. We'll see who made a mistake when I find your stash. Kieran was holding Sterling by the arm, his grip loose, almost gentle. He looked sick. Jasper, man, there's nothing here. Let's just write a warning and let her go. This doesn't feel right. Check the trunk, Jasper commanded, ignoring him. Officer, Sterling said to Kieran, turning her head slightly to look the rookie in the eye. What is your name? Officer Aldridge, ma'am, he stammered. Officer Aldridge, look at my bag, she directed calmly. There is a black leather wallet. Open it. Kieran looked at Jasper, who was busy ransacking the back seat. Kieran swallowed hard, knelt down, and picked up the soaking wet wallet from the puddle. He opened it. The blood drained from Kieran's face so fast it nearly made him faint. He didn't see a driver's license. He saw a gold shield. A heavy, intricate badge that carried significantly more weight than the silver patrol badges pinned to their chests. and below it, an ID card with the seal of the state judiciary. The Honorable Sterling Pembroke, Superior Court Judge. Kieran looked up at Sterling, horror in his eyes. He recognized her now. The Iron Orchid, the judge who had put away the leader of the East Side Syndicate last year. "Jasper," Kieran croaked. His voice was barely audible. "Found it," Jasper yelled triumphantly, pulling a small prescription bottle from the glove box. "Pills! Unmarked bottle!" "Those are aspirin, you idiot," Sterling said. "Jasper!" Kieran yelled, standing up. "Stop! Stop right now!" Jasper froze, looking back at his partner. "What is your problem, Boot?" Kieran walked over, his hands shaking, and held the wallet out to Jasper. "Look, just look." Jasper snatched the wallet, annoyed. "What? Is it a fake ID? Does she have warrants?" He looked down. The streetlights reflected off the gold badge. The word judge seemed to glow in the darkness. Jasper Whitbourne stopped breathing. The rain continued to hammer down, but the world went silent. He looked at the ID. He looked at the woman he had slammed against the car. He looked at the handcuffs on her wrists. He looked at the file folder lying in the mud near his feet, the one he had tossed aside. He squinted at the label. Internal Affairs Review, Officer Jasper Whitbourne. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the stomach. He hadn't just arrested a judge. He had arrested the judge who was actively investigating him. Sterling straightened up, pulling away from Kieran's loose grip. She turned to face Jasper. Her hair was wet, her silk blouse ruined, mud on her trousers. But she looked 10 feet tall. "Unlock these cuffs," she said. It wasn't a request. Jasper stood paralyzed. His career was flashing before his eyes, not in a metaphorical way, but in a very literal calculation of pension, benefits, and jail time. "I said," Sterling's voice cracked like a whip, "unlock these cuffs, Officer Whitbourne." I didn't know," Jasper stammered, his bravado evaporating into the humid night. You were reaching, I thought." "You thought you saw a victim," Sterling corrected him. "Now, keys." Kieran fumbled for his keys, stepping forward quickly. "I got it, Judge. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." As the cuffs clicked open and Sterling rubbed her wrists, headlights swept across the scene. A black SUV tore around the corner, followed by 2 more patrol cars. Sterling had triggered the silent panic button on her key fob the moment Jasper pulled her out of the car. It was a feature given to high-risk judges. The SUV screeched to a halt. Captain Verona Steele stepped out. She was a tall woman with gray-streaked hair and a face carved from granite. She took in the scene in seconds. The judge, the disheveled rookie, and Jasper Whitbourne holding a judge's wallet like it was a live grenade. "Report!" Verona barked, marching over. "Captain Steele," Sterling said, her voice cool and composed as she brushed debris off her sleeve. "It is excellent to see you. I believe Officer Whitbourne was just about to explain why he assaulted a Superior Court justice, conducted an illegal search without probable cause, and drew a firearm on an unarmed elected official." Verona turned her gaze to Jasper. If looks could kill, Jasper would have been incinerated on the spot. "Whitbourne," Verona said, her voice low and dangerous. "Gun and badge, now." "Captain." She resisted. Jasper tried, desperation creeping into his voice. "She didn't identify herself. She was driving a car I worked 20 years to buy," Sterling interjected. "Give the captain your weapon, Jasper. You won't be needing it anymore." Jasper's hand trembled as he unholstered his Glock. He handed it to Verona. Then he unpinned his shield. "You're suspended pending an immediate psychiatric and disciplinary hearing," Verona said. "Get in the back of the squad car, not yours, the cage." As Jasper was led away, walking past Sterling, their eyes met. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a deep, feral fear. But Sterling didn't gloat. She just watched him with the clinical detachment of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. "This isn't over," Jasper whispered as he passed her. "No," Sterling replied softly. "It's just beginning." She watched the door slam shut on him, but as she bent down to pick up the muddy file folder from the street, Sterling felt a strange chill. Jasper had been targeting her. It was too coincidental. He had pulled her over, yes, but he had seemed ready. She opened the muddy file folder. Inside, stuck to the back of the first page, was a sticky note that hadn't been there when she left the office. It had been placed there by someone in her chambers. It read, "He knows. Watch your back." Sterling looked up at the rain-swept street. This wasn't just police brutality. This was a setup. And she had walked right into the trap, even if she had won the first round. Karma was coming. But for who? The morning sun that filtered into Sterling Pembroke's kitchen did not bring warmth. It brought a stark, revealing light to the bruises blooming across her chest and wrists. Standing before the island counter in her silk robe, Sterling traced the purple and yellow mottling on her skin. They were ugly, jagged marks, the signature of a system that had tried to break her the night before. She took a sip of black coffee, her hand trembling slightly. Not from fear, she told herself, but from the adrenaline crash. Her phone had been buzzing incessantly since 5 a.m. The news cycle was already churning. Superior Court judge arrested in traffic stop gone wrong. Officer suspended after altercation with local judge. The headlines were carefully passive, designed to spread blame like butter over too much bread. Sterling ignored the calls. She had work to do. When she arrived at the courthouse 2 hours later, the atmosphere had shifted. Usually, the security officers at the metal detectors, most of them retired cops or active duty on overtime, would greet her with a nod or a, "Good morning, Your Honor." Today, there was only silence. As she passed the checkpoint, Officer Miller, a man she had known for 5 years, stared straight ahead, refusing to meet her eyes. The air was thick with unspoken hostility. The blue wall was not a myth. It was a physical weight pressing against the marble walls of the Hall of Justice. They didn't see a judge who had been assaulted. They saw a threat to one of their own. "Judge Pembroke!" Sterling turned to see Camille Frost striding down the hallway, her heels clicking aggressively against the floor. The defense attorney looked impeccable as always, but her expression was tight. "Camille," Sterling said, continuing to walk toward the elevators, "I assume you're not here to discuss the fentanyl case." "I'm not." Camille lowered her voice, falling into step beside her. "I'm hearing whispers, Sterling. Bad ones. The police union is already circling the wagons around Whitbourne. They're going to paint you as intoxicated, belligerent, and power-hungry. They're digging into your past, your finances, everything." "Let them dig," Sterling said coldly, pressing the elevator button. "My life is a pane of glass." "Glass shatters, Sterling," Camille warned, grabbing the judge's arm gently. "Jasper Whitbourne isn't just a legacy hire. His father, Captain Whitbourne, still runs the darkest corners of the 4th Precinct from his retirement home. You poked the bear, and now the whole pack is coming. I'm telling you this as a friend. Recuse yourself from the Oversight Committee. Drop the inquiry." Sterling pulled her arm away, her eyes flashing. "If I back down now, Camille, I am not a judge. I am a victim. And I refused to be a victim when I was poor. And I certainly refuse to be one now that I hold the gavel. If they want war, they'll get it." The elevator doors opened. Sterling stepped inside and turned back to Camille. "And Camille, if you hear any more whispers, write them down." Up in her chambers, the sanctuary of her office felt violated. The sticky note found in the file, "He knows. Watch your back," burned a hole in her mind. Someone close to her had betrayed her. Dahlia King was at her desk, looking pale and terrified. When Sterling entered, Dahlia jumped, knocking a stack of files to the floor. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," Dahlia stammered, scrambling to pick them up. "Leave them," Sterling commanded softly. She walked over and closed the door, locking it. She turned to her clerk. Dahlia, who had access to this office yesterday afternoon? Dahlia's eyes went wide. Just me, Judge. And the cleaning crew. And, well, Captain Steele came by to drop off some warrants for signature while you were in court. Sterling froze. Verona Steele. The woman who had arrested Jasper last night. The woman who had seemed so professional, so by the book. Did Captain Steele touch my desk? Sterling asked. She waited here for a few minutes while I went to get the stamp, Dahlia admitted, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't think anything of it. She's the captain. Sterling walked to her window, looking out over the city. The pieces were starting to click into place, but the picture they formed was grotesque. If Verona Steele had planted the note, was it a warning from a friend or a threat from an enemy playing both sides? Get me the surveillance logs for the hallway, Sterling said, her voice devoid of emotion, and get Officer Kieran Aldridge on the phone, privately. Use the burner, not the office line. The rookie? Dahlia asked. He's the weak link, Sterling murmured, watching a police cruiser slowly circle the block below. And we are going to break him before they do. The rain had stopped, but the city remained gray and oppressive. In a small diner on the outskirts of town, far from the prying eyes of the precinct, Sterling sat in a back booth. She wore a baseball cap and a trench coat, looking less like a judge and more like a noir detective. 10 minutes late, Kieran Aldridge slid into the seat opposite her. He looked terrible. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, and his hands shook as he reached for the menu. You shouldn't have asked me to come here, Kieran whispered, scanning the room. If the guys find out I'm talking to you, if the guys find out you lied in your report, you'll be facing a perjury charge that carries a mandatory minimum of 5 years, Sterling said, sliding a folder across the table. I read your preliminary statement, Officer Aldridge. It says I was erratic and refused to comply. It omits the part where Jasper drew his weapon on a cooperating driver. Kieran put his head in his hands. They made me write it. The union rep was there before we even got booked back in. He stood over my shoulder. He said if I didn't back Jasper, I'd be done. Dead in the water. No backup when I need it. A rat. And what do you think happens when I release the dash cam footage? Sterling asked, taking a sip of her tea. Kieran laughed, a dry, hopeless sound. There is no footage, Judge. The camera malfunctioned due to water damage. The SD card was corrupted. That's what the tech told us this morning. Sterling's grip on her teacup tightened until her knuckles turned white. They were erasing the truth. It was a classic cover-up, executed with military precision. Without the video, it was her word against 2 cops. And even with her status, the doubt would be enough to save Jasper's career and tarnish hers. However, Kieran said, his voice trembling, my body cam wasn't damaged. Sterling looked up sharply. You were recording? Jasper told me to turn it off, Kieran said, leaning in closer. But I was nervous. It was raining. I fumbled the switch. I didn't turn it off. I just put it in sleep mode. But the buffer, it captures the 30 seconds before activation. And I activated it fully when he pulled you out of the car. Where is that footage, Kieran? Sterling demanded. It's on a thumb drive, Kieran said. I didn't upload it to the server. If I had, they would have deleted it. It's in my locker at the gym, not the precinct gym, a boxing gym downtown. You are going to get that drive, Sterling said. Tonight. I can't, Kieran hissed. They're watching me. Jasper is suspended, but he's texting me every hour. Stay strong. Don't fold. If I make a move, they'll know. Sterling studied the young man. He was terrified, but he had a conscience. That was a rare currency in his line of work. Then we make them look the other way, Sterling said. Tomorrow morning I am convening an emergency grand jury hearing regarding the Whitbourne incident. I will subpoena the captain, the union rep, and Jasper. While everyone is focused on the courthouse, you get the drive. And if I get caught, then you call me, Sterling said, sliding a business card across the table. And I will bring down the wrath of God upon them. Kieran took the card, his hand still shaking. You don't understand, Judge. It's not just Jasper. It's Steele. It's the DA. They all use Whitbourne's father's connections. He runs the private security firms that protect their homes. He has dirt on everyone. That note you found? It wasn't a warning. It was a taunt. Sterling felt a chill go down her spine. How do you know about the note? Kieran froze. He realized he had said too much. How do you know about the note, Kieran? Sterling repeated, her voice deadly quiet. I heard Jasper laughing about it, Kieran whispered. Before the stop, he said, let's see if she finds the love letter. He knew you had the file. He knew you were coming for him. The stop wasn't random, Judge. He was waiting for you. Sterling sat back, the air leaving her lungs. It was an ambush, a premeditated attempt to intimidate or kill a sitting judge, disguised as a traffic stop. Go, Sterling said. Get the drive. Trust no one. Kieran slid out of the booth and vanished into the rainy afternoon. Sterling sat alone for a long time. She wasn't just fighting a rogue cop. She was fighting a dynasty. And to bring it down, she would have to step out of the courtroom and into the gutter. The following morning, the Hall of Justice was a fortress under siege. Reporters swarmed the steps, microphones thrust forward like spears. Sterling Pembroke walked through the gauntlet, her head high, flanked by two marshals she had personally requested, men she knew were loyal to the federal government, not the local precinct. Inside, courtroom 4B was packed. But this wasn't a trial. It was a hearing on the motion to dismiss the charges against Jasper Whitbourne, filed by the police union's top lawyer, a shark named Marcus Thorne. Jasper sat at the defense table, wearing a suit that was too tight across his muscular shoulders. He looked bored, arrogant. When Sterling entered and took the bench, he didn't even stand until Thorne nudged him. Be seated, Sterling said. She looked out at the gallery. Captain Verona Steele was in the front row, her face unreadable. Your Honor, Thorne began, standing up and smoothing his tie. This entire hearing is a farce. My client is a decorated officer who performed a routine stop. The alleged assault was standard procedure for a non-compliant suspect. We move to dismiss all charges and request that Your Honor recuse herself due to obvious bias. Bias? Sterling asked, raising an eyebrow. Mr. Thorne, your client pointed a loaded firearm at my head because I asked why I was being pulled over. So you say, Thorne countered smoothly. But without video evidence, it is simply a he-said-she-said situation. And given your history of anti-police rhetoric in your rulings, we believe you are using Officer Whitbourne as a scapegoat for your political agenda. The gallery murmured. It was a calculated attack. They were turning the victim into the villain. Sterling leaned forward. Mr. Thorne, you seem very confident that no video evidence exists. The dashcam was faulty. It's unfortunate, but common. Thorne shrugged. Is it? Sterling's eyes flicked to the back of the courtroom. The heavy oak doors swung open. A gasp went through the room. Walking down the center aisle was not Kieran Aldridge, but Dahlia King, and she was holding a laptop. Kieran was nowhere to be seen. Sterling felt a surge of panic. Had the plan failed? Had they gotten to him? Dahlia walked through the gate and placed the laptop on the clerk's desk. She plugged it into the courtroom's AV system. What is this? Thorne demanded. We have not been provided with any discovery materials. This, Sterling said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, is rebuttal evidence entered sua sponte by the court in the interest of justice. Play it, Dahlia. The large screens mounted on the walls flickered to life. The image was shaky, dark, and wet. It was footage from a chest-mounted camera. The audio crackled. Broken taillight, Aldridge. Light 'em up. Jasper Whitbourne's face went pale. He sat up straight, gripping the table. The video continued. The viewers saw Jasper storming out of the car. They heard the aggression in his voice. They saw him drawing his weapon on a woman whose hands were clearly visible. They heard the sickening thud of Sterling being slammed against the car. And then, the most damning part. After Sterling was cuffed, while Jasper was ransacking the car, the camera turned toward the patrol car's dashboard computer. The timestamp was clear, but on the screen of the police laptop, a message window was open. Target is leaving the garage. Gray Mercedes. Take her down now. Make it look real. The message was signed, V. Steele. The courtroom erupted. Sterling looked at the screen, stunned. She hadn't seen this part of the footage. Kieran hadn't mentioned the message. She looked down at Captain Verona Steele in the front row. Verona didn't move. She didn't panic. She simply stared up at Sterling, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. She stood up slowly, smoothed her uniform, and turned to the officer standing near the exit. "Secure the courtroom," Thorne was shouting. "This is inadmissible. This is an ambush." "Sit down, Mr. Thorne." Sterling slammed her gavel, the sound cracking like a gunshot. "Bailiffs, take Officer Whitbourne into custody immediately. Revoke his bail. He is a flight risk and a danger to the community." As the marshals moved toward Jasper, he exploded. He flipped the defense table, papers flying everywhere. "You set me up!" Jasper screamed, pointing at Verona Steele. "You told me to do it! You said she was getting too close to the pension fund! You said handle it!" "Shut your mouth, Jasper!" Thorne yelled, trying to grab him. "No!" Jasper roared, shoving his lawyer aside. He looked wild, cornered. "I'm not going down for this! Steele ordered the hit, and the judge's clerk, she let me in! She unlocked the door!" Sterling's head snapped toward Dahlia. Dahlia was standing by the laptop, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Sterling, her lip quivering. They said they'd hurt my mom, Sterling. They said they'd kill her." The betrayal hit Sterling harder than the car door had, her clerk, her protege. "Order! Order in the court!" Sterling shouted, but chaos had taken over. Jasper was wrestling with two bailiffs. Verona Steele was standing calmly in the center of the storm. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. The courtroom froze. Plaster rained down from the ceiling. Jasper Whitbourne had managed to grab a bailiff's gun. He was holding it, panting heavily, sweeping the muzzle across the room. "Nobody moves!" Jasper screamed. "Nobody touches me!" He locked eyes with Sterling. The madness in his gaze was total. "You!" Jasper spat, aiming the gun directly at the bench. "You ruined everything!" Sterling Pembroke didn't duck. She didn't scream. She stood up, her black robes flowing around her, looking like the personification of judgment itself. "Put it down, Jasper," she said, her voice cutting through the panic. "There is no way out of this room. The only choice you have left is whether you leave in cuffs or a body bag." "I prefer the one where I take you with me," Jasper snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. Sterling saw the muscles in his forearm tense. She knew, with the clarity of someone who had seen violence her whole life, that he was going to fire. Seconds. She had seconds. "Drop it!" a voice shouted from the gallery. Kieran Aldridge emerged from the back, his service weapon drawn. He was battered, his face swollen, one arm hanging uselessly by his side, but his aim was steady. "Jasper, drop it!" Kieran screamed. Jasper turned his head just for a fraction of a second, distracted by his partner's betrayal. That was all Sterling needed. She grabbed the heavy crystal water pitcher from her bench and hurled it with all her strength. It wasn't a bullet, but it was an act of defiance. The pitcher smashed into Jasper's shoulder, shattering. The gun fired, the bullet biting into the wood of the judge's bench, inches from Sterling's hip. Before Jasper could recover, 3 marshals tackled him. The gun skittered across the floor. Sterling stood amidst the debris, her chest heaving. She looked at Verona Steele, who was now being handcuffed by federal agents who had entered from the rear. She looked at Dahlia, who was sobbing into her hands. and she looked at Kieran, the rookie who had saved her life. The battle was over, but the war for the soul of the city had just begun, and Sterling Pembroke was done playing by the rules. She picked up her gavel, miraculously unbroken, and banged it once. "Recess," she whispered. The silence in Sterling Pembroke's chambers was heavier than the chaos of the courtroom had ever been. The broken glass had been swept away, the bullet hole in the mahogany bench filled with wood putty, but the psychological cracks remained. Sterling sat at her desk, staring at the empty chair where Dahlia King used to sit. 2 days had passed since the shooting. Jasper was in a maximum security federal lockup. Captain Verona Steele was in solitary confinement, her bail denied. And Dahlia was gone. There was a soft knock on the door. It wasn't the tentative knock of a clerk, but the heavy rhythmic rap of a cane. Sterling looked up. "Come in." Kieran Aldridge hobbled in. His arm was in a sling, his face a map of purple bruises and butterfly stitches, and he was leaning heavily on a cane. He looked like he had gone 10 rounds with a freight train, but his eyes were clear. "You look terrible, officer," Sterling said, a small smile touching her lips. "You should see the other guy." Kieran cracked a painful smile, wincing as he sat down. "Oh, wait, the other guy is facing 3 counts of attempted murder and domestic terrorism. I think I won." "You saved my life, Kieran," Sterling said, her voice dropping the judicial veneer. "You walked into a courtroom full of armed marshals with your gun drawn to save me. They could have shot you." "They almost did," Kieran admitted, "but I couldn't let him do it. I couldn't let them win." He hesitated, looking at the empty clerk's desk. Have you heard from her?" Sterling's expression hardened. "Dahlia is in protective custody. She's turned state's witness. She's giving the feds everything. The threats against her mother, the times Steele forced her to leave files unlocked, the planted sticky notes." "She betrayed you," Kieran said softly. "She was terrified," Sterling corrected. "Verona Steele threatened to burn her mother's house down with her inside." "Fear makes people do terrible things, Kieran. It doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. Dahlia will do time for obstruction of justice, but she'll live. That is the mercy the law allows." Kieran nodded, shifting his injured leg. "So what happens now?" "The precinct is in shambles. Half the narcotics division is being investigated. The union is screaming about a witch hunt." Sterling stood up and walked to the window. The city skyline looked the same as it always did, steel and glass reaching for the clouds. But down on the streets, the storm was finally clearing. "It's not a witch hunt when you're hunting monsters, Kieran," she said. "Steele wasn't just protecting bad cops. She was running a protection racket for the very gangs we sentence in this building. The pension fund Jasper screamed about? It wasn't a retirement plan. It was a slush fund of bribe money." She turned back to him. "I have a meeting with the district attorney in an hour. I'm going to recommend that you be transferred out of the 4th precinct. You can't go back there. You're a pariah now." "I know." Kieran looked down at his hands. "I was thinking of quitting. Maybe going into private security." "Don't," Sterling said sharply. "Good officers are rare. If you quit, they win. I'm having you moved to the DA's investigative unit. You'll answer to me and the prosecutor. No patrols, no quotas, just finding the truth." Kieran looked up, shock registering on his battered face. "Judge, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Sterling commanded. "Because the trial of the century starts in 3 months, and I need someone I can trust to watch my back." The trial of the people versus Verona Steele did not take place in Sterling's courtroom. She had recused herself, citing her status as a victim in the case. Instead, she sat in the gallery watching Judge Horace Thorne, a man known for his leniency, preside over the proceedings. But Verona Steele had made a fatal error. She assumed that without Sterling on the bench, she could manipulate the system. She didn't realize that Sterling had spent the last 3 months building a case so watertight that not even a laser could cut through it. The prosecution's star witness was not Kieran Aldridge. It was Jasper Whitbourne. Jasper was led into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the waist and ankles. He had aged 10 years in 3 months. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man who realized he had been a pawn in a queen's game. "Mr. Whitbourne," the prosecutor began, pacing in front of the jury, "can you tell the court who ordered the traffic stop on Judge Pembroke?" "Captain Verona Steele," Jasper said, his voice flat. "And what were your instructions?" "To intimidate her, to find something, anything, to ruin her credibility. And if she resisted, to make it look like an accident." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Verona Steele sat at the defense table stone-faced, scribbling on a notepad. "Why?" the prosecutor asked. Jasper looked at Verona. For a moment, a spark of the old anger flared in his eyes. "Because Judge Pembroke was looking into the excessive force complaints. If she dug too deep, she would have found the patterns, the payouts, the money laundering through the Union Legal Fund." "And did Captain Steele threaten you?" "She told me I was a legacy," Jasper spat the word out. "She said my father built this city, and it was my job to keep the rats out. She said if I didn't handle the judge, she'd release the file on my excessive force cases to the press herself. She played me." The testimony dragged on for hours. Bank records were shown. Text messages were displayed. The blue wall crumbled brick by brick, exposing the rot underneath. When the verdict finally came down 2 weeks later, the city held its breath. "We, the jury," the foreman read, his hands trembling, "find the defendant, Verona Steele, guilty on all counts: racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice." Verona didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply stood up, smoothed her skirt, and held out her wrists for the handcuffs. As she was led away, she stopped briefly near the gallery where Sterling was sitting. "You think you've won," Verona said, her voice a dry rasp. "But you just cut off one head, Sterling. Another will grow." Sterling didn't blink. She leaned forward, her voice low enough that only Verona could hear. "Then I'll be here to cut that one off, too. And the next one. Until you run out of heads." Verona was led away, the heavy doors closing on her career and her freedom. Sterling stood up, smoothed her own silk blouse, and walked out of the courtroom. The press was waiting, a sea of cameras and shouting voices. "Judge Pembroke! Judge Pembroke! Do you feel justice was served?" "Judge, are you planning to run for district attorney?" Sterling stopped at the top of the courthouse steps. She looked out at the city, clean and bright in the afternoon sun. She saw Kieran standing near her car, wearing a suit and a badge on his belt, watching the crowd for threats. She stepped up to the microphones. "Justice," Sterling said, her voice projecting clearly without shouting, "is not a meal that is served. It is a garden that must be tended. We pulled some weeds today, deep, ugly roots that have been strangling this city for decades. But the work isn't done. It never is." She walked down the steps, the crowd parting for her like the Red Sea. 1 year later. The 4th Precinct had a new captain, an outsider brought in from another state with a mandate to clean house. The halls of the Hall of Justice were quieter, more respectful. The fear was gone, replaced by a cautious optimism. Sterling Pembroke sat in her chambers reviewing the docket for the day. Her new clerk, a young man named David who was terrified of making mistakes but eager to learn, knocked on the door. "Your Honor, the transport is here for the arraignments." "Thank you, David. I'll be right there." Sterling stood up and put on her robe. The black fabric felt familiar, comforting. It was her armor. She walked over to the framed photo on her bookshelf. It was a picture taken at Kieran's promotion ceremony. He was smiling, a real smile this time, pinned with a detective's shield. Sterling stood next to him, looking proud. Kieran had become her right hand in the DA's office. Together, they had launched a task force that had exonerated 5 wrongfully convicted men in the last 6 months. Men who had been framed by Jasper and his crew years ago. Karma hadn't just hit back, it had reshaped the world. Sterling walked into the courtroom. The bailiff shouted, "All rise!" Everyone stood. The attorneys, the defendants, the families. They stood not out of fear, but out of respect. They knew that in this room money didn't buy freedom and a badge didn't grant immunity. Sterling took her seat. She looked out at the faces. She saw hope. She saw fear. She saw humanity. She picked up her gavel. It was a new one, made of ebony, a gift from the community leaders after the trial. She thought about Jasper, currently serving 20 years in a federal penitentiary. She thought about Verona Steele, rotting in a cell, her dynasty reduced to ash. And she thought about that rainy night, the cold gun against her head, and the choice she had made to fight back. She struck the sound block. Crack. "Court is now in session," Sterling Pembroke said. "Let justice be done." The story of Sterling Pembroke is more than a legal thriller. It is a reminder that power unchecked is tyranny, and that courage often looks like a lone woman standing in the rain, refusing to bow. Jasper Whitbourne and Verona Steele believed they were the law, but they forgot that the law is a shield for the people, not a sword for the powerful. In the end, it wasn't violence that defeated them. It was the truth, wielded by someone brave enough to speak it. And that is the story of how one judge took down a corrupt empire with nothing but her wits and the truth. It's a powerful reminder that no matter how high the walls are or how deep the corruption runs, one person standing their ground can bring it all crashing down. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, make sure to smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about karma hitting back hard, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. What would you have done in Sterling's position? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, stay strong, and I'll see you in the next one.